what is the worst mistake that entrepreneurs consistently make when they're trying to deploy a VA in their business?
A lot of it comes down to ego and this idea that like only I can do the thing, right? So
Hmm.
that is a very insidious and very sort of pervasive way that they think through all the things that they do, where it's like some of it's about trust, some of it's about a lack of knowledge, and honestly, at the end of the day, some of it is a lack of mastery, right? Because I would argue that if you can teach something, then you have some level of mastery of it, right? A lot of people would say that. Every time when I used to do a lot of speaking in person, and before COVID, of course, and like I've spoken in I think like 15 countries at this point, and lots and lots of stages. And I always love to ask people, raise your hand if you've ever outsourced something. And you'll get a large percentage of people raising their hands, and more over the years. I've been doing this for like 15 years. And then I'm like, all right, now if you've ever had a bad experience outsourcing something, raise your hand. And invariably, more people raise their hands than originally raised their hands for the question, right? So it's like, all right, so to be clear, more of you have had a bad experience outsourcing than have actually outsourced something. Got it. I was like, so here's the good news. It was probably your fault because people are not natural born communicators. Some people might be natural born leaders. I do not think people are naturally born communicators. You really have to, it's a skill we really have to learn. And what always happens with outsourcing is that people approach it, if they're not good at it, they approach it with a very binary kind of attitude, which is that either this is a thing that I have to do completely on my own, or this is a thing that somebody else completely has to do on their own. It's very binary. And so neither of those is a very comfortable scenario to live in. And what they end up doing, they give it to somebody who has less information and less context than they do just by design, while at the same time expecting a superior result than they would have delivered themselves. You are like guaranteeing you're setting somebody up for failure. And then what happens is that people then have a bad taste in their mouth about outsourcing. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. It's like, yeah, I tried that, but this happened.
Do you need more framework with VAs? Do you need specific types of tasks? What's the common pitfall for entrepreneurs when they're first doing it?
Yeah, so outsourcing first. That's the big problem. So it's not a particularly issue. It's not particularly an issue with the VA. I think you definitely want to have tighter systems with VAs. Not so much because they're remote, but because kind of like by definition, they're a little interchangeable. And I'm not dehumanizing people, but just like the role of a VA kind of by design is, swappable, right? You should be able to have somebody else fill in that role.
Yeah, so you're going to tell me your framework, and I want to tee this up a little bit because
Yeah.
one of the things that I like about how you approach, and I think that this is necessary, but one of the things I like about how you approach efficiency is by these sort of building blocks or frameworks that people can follow, like a structure to approach how to be efficient. Elon Musk has a framework it's like his algorithm framework is, I think, what he calls it, but it's question every requirement, delete unnecessary steps, optimize, accelerate cycle time, and automate process. And he's got kind of interesting thoughts about why he does that. You have a similar structure that is optimize, automate, outsource. And I think where you were going just now was people outsource first instead of those first two steps. So tell me the importance of that structure and that framework for you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So a lot of people outsource as like a knee-jerk reaction, right? Like, I don't want to do this thing. I don't know how to do this thing. This is annoying. It takes too much time. I'm going to hire somebody to do it. That's the backwards way of approaching this, right? So with mine, it's optimize first. You need to optimize the actual problem. And a lot of optimizing is actually understanding it. There's so much of things that we do just because that's how we've always done them. And we don't have a really deep understanding of why. Where you see that the most is when people try to write down or create processes. They skip over all the heuristics and all the shortcuts in their brain that they aren't even aware that they're using, and then the other person doesn't have the information. So we have to optimize the actual problem first, because if you give an inefficient problem to somebody else to deal with, it's like sweeping the dirt under the rug, right? Like, it doesn't actually make it go away, and it just builds up, because then that person, again, doesn't have the knowledge, the resources. It doesn't work. And then the next step, once you've optimized, then we want to look at automation. And automation now, especially with AI, is stuff we can automate things that weeks ago, a person had to do. You can have done with a free bot or a free agent on ChatGPT. And the thing is if you give that work to a person that you could have had an AI do or something, you're in essence dehumanizing them. And they will not engage with that work. They will not do a good job on it. They will not enjoy it. There will be no sustainability to that. we want to optimize, then automate, and then what's left is the thing that we want to outsource to some sort of generalist or some sort of specialist, because that's something where they really need them. We need a human. We need that person with that skill set or that to be able to add that value to that, and they will be able to engage with that work in a better way as well.
I mean, we've got to jump into AI. So, how has AI impacted the elements of outsourcing to a VA?
So over the years, I have personally have worked with over 500 VAs in different capacities, in my own company and other companies in all sorts of different ways. I'm always trying to avoid outsourcing, right? So I want to optimize what I can, and I want to automate as much, or if all of it, if possible. So as much as I've tried to avoid outsourcing, I've still outsourced hundreds of thousands of dollars of things and thousands of hours of things, right? So that just shows you like how much there is. I have not had a VA or any kind of assistant with me in over 3 years now.
Mm.
I'm involved in a lot of different things. I'm involved in municipal groups. I'm involved in a couple different charities. I have 5 children.
Whew.
Yeah, ChatGPT is my external brain at this point. Now I can't execute in the same way that a VA can, but it can get me right up to that point where I can just click a button.
Have you played with any agents?
Yeah, I mean, I've built stuff with Replit, but to be perfectly honest, like it's as valuable to me to be like, I have a leak in my house or something, find these 3 plumbers and then like tell me which one I should call first, and then for me to make a call. Like I'm fine with that. I spend enough time in the car, like taking kids back and forth to school, like totally not a problem. Yeah, I could have a VA do that, but uh, it's like getting me to like the 3-yard line essentially, and that's totally
Mm-hmm.
fine, because productivity is not all or nothing, right? Like, and there are things that you can learn through that process of being somewhat involved in things sometimes. The issue is if you really don't have the time or the bandwidth and you can't hand that over, that becomes a problem, and I'm not in that place because of how things are managed.
Yeah, you said something that's really interesting to me right now, which is productivity is not all or nothing, and by being involved, you can learn from the process. One of the things that I have seen consistently throughout, decades in business now is the frustration that comes from people, but employees in particular, that have been given a task, um, that you like given a project and then you don't use the output, or you seemingly don't use the output, right? So they're like, I did all this fucking work and you're not even going to fucking use it. You're not even listening to me. And I think what you just said is so important for people to hear, which is the point may not be the output. The point might be that you got a better grip on the situation and understanding the steps, like how to optimize the process, so that next time you do it, you're going to be much better. And it's not actually getting to the output right now. It's going through the exercise of learning. And I know that it sounds cliche that like, life is a journey or whatever, and it's about learning. It's not about the end. But truly, everything you do, if you put focus on it, will serve you in the next step. And that's a cool thing to think about relative to AI also.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's really about being more effective, right? And I'm pretty sure it's Tim Ferriss who said this a while ago, which was like productivity is producing more, efficiency is producing more with less, but being effective is producing the right things. And so
Mm.
there's no awards for being, I mean, I guess there are some maybe, but there's not really an award for like being the most productive. It just doing more doesn't doesn't have any sort of inherent meaning to it, right? It's really about doing the right things, and sometimes, a lot of times, figuring out what those right things are that's the hardest part. That's a lot of what I ultimately have to help people figure out with my coaching sometimes, because of the ego aspect of that. But like, I could outsource so much more in my life. We could have a private chef, we could have a maid, we could have a driver, uh, but then so what? So that I could do more work. Like it's like, what are we optimizing for in some cases? I think about that image so often, where it's like you get to this point where things are so optimized and uh, so automated, so streamlined, and like if you come up with an idea as an entrepreneur, you can give it to a system, and then that system creates it and it goes into fruition. You can see that. It's like, well, so then what do you do? Well, go do the dishes. Like it's like that's what you do. You put your hands on something and you do something tangible, and then again with the 5 kids, like if I'm lucky, I can spend a few minutes at the end of it, like the bedtime routine. Like I can go to each one for a few minutes, and talk about something. Like that's why we should be optimizing for these things so that we can do more of the things that seem mundane, but ultimately are the things that are really that are more real and make us more human.